All right. Hopefully you can hear me. We're here to talk about WordPress development. A little bit about me. I have over 30 years of IT experience. I'm a twice-N certified engineer. If you've heard of the Northeast PHP Conference, that's in Boston area. We've had it in Charlottetown before. I was the co-founder of that. They're not doing it this year. I'm not involved so much anymore, but check out that URL for if you ever want to go to Boston and attend that conference and be a tourist at the same time. It's a great conference. I'm the author and co-author of 5 books, and I am a travel blogger occasionally, so Verona might show up on my blog. It probably will. I've spoken at a few conferences. These are some of the conferences I've attended. I'm a big rugby fan. I know Italy's in the, don't tell me, 6 nations. This is me. I took this picture. It's New Zealand beating France in 2015. It was a great game. I'm the grandfather of 2 people, 2 kids, and I live and work in PEI. So trivia time. Whoever gets this right without looking on the phone gets a copy of one of my books. Where is Prince Edward Island? No? Has anyone ever heard of Anne of Green Gables? No? All right. Nobody gets a book. You can look up on your phones now if you want. It's in Canada, eastern Canada. It's Canada's smallest province. It's a little island, and that's where I'm from. So these are the books I've been involved with. We've got 2 coming up, 2 updates coming up in the fall. This one's being almost totally rewritten, and PHP programming. PHP is being done as a new PHP 7 version. So we're working on those 2 right now. So what does my company do? That's a little bit about me. I have some clients all over the world, global clients. And if you want to check out some of my sites, it's mostly WordPress, e-commerce, but I have done custom programming and, of course, WordPress plugin development, and that's why I'm here. So we're going to talk about advanced. What does advanced mean? We're going to look at both front-end and back-end portions of the WordPress area. We're going to look at some of the rules, create some menus as we go through the code, deal with form management and database connections. We're going to look at widget creation, a little bit on the dashboard widget, which is kind of a niche thing, and where to place the widgets, short codes, and then look at internationalization of your code, of your plugin, and some tips on how to release it into the world. Has anyone developed a plugin before? 2, 3? Oh. Uh-oh. I'm going to be critiqued. That's good. Hopefully you'll learn. I'm still learning. I've created probably 5, 6 plugins now. And we've just recently released 2 or 3 of them are just being released now. So we're going to look at the guidelines of what a plugin outlines, best practices. Of course, this is a big thing to be aware of. Never mess with the WordPress core code. Just leave it alone. Don't touch it. It's only a world of problems if you get into that. Keep your code separate, even if it's from, if you have complementary groups of plugins that work with interact with each other, keep them separate so that there's no code collisions. Use the WordPress API functions whenever possible, instead of writing your own, and prefix your code with something. I'm using an example today called architect subscribers, and we can prefix it with ARCH or architect, something that makes it unique to itself. Oh, also, we're going to try and keep our questions to the end, just so keep in mind if you have a question on the earlier parts, then we can try and go back to them. So some other good ideas is to use object-oriented programming whenever possible. You don't absolutely need it, but it's a better idea. It helps to encapsulate your code as well. And of course, you want to always follow secure guidelines. And there's a whole section in the WordPress development area about how to your code and your input, escape your input, and so on. So the simple things, what to do, well, we want to install WordPress. That's pretty straightforward. You want to think about your plugin. Certainly don't develop it in the real world. Have a development environment or a staging site, because it's going to break 3 or 4 times at least as you're developing things. You want to have it in a safe place. We'll go over this. I have some real-world examples, and we'll look at code and folder structures later. But you want to name your folder under the WordPress content folder, and name it. If it's multi-named, I'm calling mine Architect Subscribers. Just use a dash in between for multiple names. If you're going to put yours into the WordPress pool of plugins for the world to use and WordPress.org to use and distribute, you want to have a README text file and an uninstall PHP. So that's really all you need for a real simple plugin, is just 2 or 3 files. If you're going to distribute it through the WordPress pool, these are the folder structures that you should follow. Assets are your screenshots. That's where they go. Any CSS goes here, and so on. You can see those. I spend a lot of time here, include where I'm bringing in files that are my multiple disciplines and multiple actions. And if you want to get more fine-tuned, you can create your own folders as long as you handle those properly and make sure they interact in some way with at least have the basic folders. We're going to look at the basic file header of a plugin. So the name is Architect Subscribers, the URL, description. These all show up on the plugin when it's released. So you keep your version and your author, your URLs like this in the top of the original file. After that, you have to have a public license. GPL2 is typically the one that's used, and you have to have a URL for whatever license you're going to be using. Everyone familiar with all this as you go forward? Okay. So that doesn't come out that well, but when you do install your plugin, that's where the name is. There's the description, the version number, and so on, and the URLs that automatically gets picked up from this file. So the plugin name, all this stuff, description, shows up here automatically for you. So you can see those things here. That's the number corresponding to them. So when you want to plan your plugin, these are some of the basic questions you want to ask yourself. Well, first of all, what's it going to do? That's a simple question, but it needs to be asked. Just to get your brain working, you don't want to be at 2 in the morning and get frustrated with WordPress and you're going to go and create your own plugin and you have no idea, you're just mad. Well, that's where you have to take some time and think. So some of these considerations are pretty important. Will it integrate with other parts of WordPress? Well, you have to plan your code accordingly. Where's it going to be? Well, what folder names, so on. I created a plugin that integrates with WooCommerce, and that was one of the biggest struggles I had to do was to remember to keep it separate from WooCommerce. You're bringing in, you're connecting to WooCommerce's database, bringing in some of its data, manipulating it in your own tables, and showing you things out on your own plugin. So even though it integrates, the hard part really was remember to keep it separate so that you can have one without the other. So that's one to really remember. And are you going to do multiple versions, a free one and a commercial one, or both? The free one would be typically go through the WordPress.com.org site, and the commercial one is typically you sell on your own. So you got to plan some of that stuff. What parts are going to be free? What parts are going to be commercial? Do you have two code bases, one for free or one for commercial, or do you just turn things on and off based on whether it's free or for sale? And of course, you have to know, do you have a good bunch of testers that can help you with your plugin as you develop it? And who are your stakeholders? You might be developing it for your own company or a certain company, so you want to be able to deal with them. So this is a list of functions, admin functions, that you want to be able to be aware of. These are the ones that allow you to put menu items under specific parts of the admin page. If you want to create your own folder, your own menu level, you would use add menu page, and this is the one we're going to be using. But if, for example, you're doing something that's related to users and you want to put that under the users menu, you would use that specific function. We're going to look at some code on the slides, and then we're going to look at the code in the real world as well. So this is kind of disjointed until we see it in the code files. So always you want to try and save yourself some time and some effort. So define some constants. These are just permanent variables that you create. In my case, we're using it to point to an icon that I'm going to use in multiple places. So I just want to have one path for it once. I don't have, if I change the icon, I can just go in here and change this, and it's filtered everywhere throughout the plugin. So the file locations you're going to use on whether you're going to the file locations are for pieces that you're going to bring in for inclusions and so on. These are the functions that we'll often use. Add action, these are an add filter, register widget, this is specific to widget creation, and short codes. We'll look at these briefly. Most of our time is going to be looking at adding actions, and then for register activation hooks for plugin installs and updates. So we'll look at some of those as well. You guys have built plugins, you get into this kind of stuff already? This deep? Okay. So this might not be that new to you guys. Anyone find out where PEI is yet? Did you care? You didn't care to look? Okay. Nobody? Okay. So we're going to bring in supporting cast. This is where we bring in like some JavaScript and later on some CSS. We need to use this in QScript function. WP underscore usually refers to WordPress function. So if you're creating a plugin, don't call it with those prefixes because you'll cause yourself some collisions. And then to bring in style sheets, we'll use the enqueue style as well. If you're going to only use your style on admin, use admin print styles rather than init. Does anyone know what init means or what this first function parameter is for? You might get a book. Sorry? Initialize, but in what aspect? As opposed to admin print styles or any other option here. We'll see different options throughout here. It's an event hook, but init is important in the sense that after WordPress loads its body of information, its framework, if we have any add action inits, that's the next thing it'll initialize. So we're right after WordPress loads what it needs to run, it'll start looking for stuff that we create, and we can use it as init. Um, so, for example, we need to use our style sheets right away. So we want that available right away. So we'll use an init, an add action. The second parameter is a function call that when WordPress loads, seeds the initialization, looks for this function to run. So here's our function up here, CSS add script. So all it's doing is saying, all we're doing is telling WordPress, when you start up, when you're done with what you need to do, my stuff, and run it. And here's the function that I want you to run when you do it. So it's going to run this function. Anything in here gets loaded. So here's our CSS. Remember the file structure? CSS is one of them. And then it's our architect custom CSS file is going to be loaded with this in Q style. Does that make sense? Okay. If it's a quick question, you can ask it right away. I just didn't, if there's major questions, try and keep them to the end. So is that clear? It's good? Okay. So then, like I said earlier, we're going to use our admin menu. So we're having another add action. Here we're going to add our admin menu and call our arc menu function. So again, like you mentioned, it's a hook. When the admin menu is beginning to be built, this is that action that we want to run, and we're going to run this function called arc menu. So here's our code. Again, to look back, we're in our main plugin file called architect. I forget already. What do we call it? Architect visitors. Or anyway, we'll see it. Architect subscribers. That's it. I remembered. So we'll have this function, arc menu, will run. We're using the WordPress add menu page, and this is what we're going to have on our first menu. So we're going to build our code. This, the menu title is architect free. The page title is this. When we go into our settings page, the access level is this option, and the menu slug, this is for finding the function later on. And this is the function call. We'll see that a little bit later. And if you remember architect icon, that was one of the defined constants we had earlier. So I don't have to put in a whole string in here for where that icon is. It'll just notice this and fill in my icon. Here's a bit of trivia. You might get a book. What does this number mean? Sorry? Priority of?
Where the menu page should be shown into the menu.
Okay, that's close. Do you agree?
No, I said order, just
Order, similar to priority. Okay, I can't rip the book in half, but it's close. So it's an arbitrary number. So you could have someone else could have number 25 or number 27, and WordPress just kind of looks at these numbers and puts them in the menu order as best it can approximate them in the list. So even though 25 is kind of, you want to be in the top 25% of the menu, so towards the top. If that was 75, it'd be lower down, but you don't really know where it's going to be because WordPress is going to sort that out for you. If that makes sense. This is a submenu, so again we're just using a submenu. This goes underneath our admin menu. Again, we're going to see this in live. This menu or manage options is an access level, so you can control within WordPress who has the access to this plugin. So there's basic roles: super admin, administrator, editor, author, contributor. But within these levels, there's sub-levels. So we're using manage options. That just means they are an administrator that can do certain things. So you can look at this list of capabilities, and you'll see there's probably 10 or 15 sub-levels within that, if you want to be really specific of who can do what and who can have access to your plugin. Again, there's another, here we're going to look at listing subscribers. Before that, we were looking at settings. So we're just going to build a little plugin that does our subscribers. So this is what it will look like. Here's our admin menu. I just called it Architect Free, even though it's Architect Subscribers. And this is what we wanted to do that. So it's going to be a plugin that allows our website's guests to sign up with an email address. It's a real simple thing, but there's a lot to it when you think about it. Also, when a new blog post is published, anyone that gave us their email, we'll send them an email announcement saying that there's something new on our website. So let's take a little look at the code. So here's my code. Is that big enough for everyone to see? The font, you can read that? Okay. So here's all our plugin name, as we saw before in the slides. I'm in development mode, so I'm using this. I just want to turn my errors on, but currently it's off. So if anything goes wrong, I'll see it mostly on the website as it shows up and tell me some of my programming errors if they come along. So here's our file structures. So assets, CSS. I didn't mention images, but that's where your logos and icons will go. Here's our includes. And then further down, here's our languages, our files. So our main file here we're looking at, that's a description and the GPL license. Here's our defined constants. I do a lot of commenting, so you'll see little blocks of code like that for myself. If I look at this 3 months later, I wouldn't know what's going on. So help to define myself plugins. I do have on my slides later where this code is, so it's not complete, but it's you're welcome to it. And it'll be when our revised book of this comes out, the code will be, that code will be in here. So so here's our, I skipped the languages part, but we'll do that later. Here's our supporting cast. Like I mentioned before, we're bringing in the code for JavaScript and CSS. And here's our menus. So we have the main menu. Our submenu is called settings, and they use the same slug, I think it is, architect admin. That is, so the main menu of my plugin does the same thing as the first sub menu of settings. So if I click on the name, it'll go to settings. If I click on settings, it'll go to settings. And here's the add action for the admin menu, and it's calling arc menu, which is this function up here, arc menu, and it builds that whole menu system when the plugin, when WordPress loads. Any quick questions so far?
I don't know if it's quick, but you said that even if two plugins depend on each other, is it better to, I mean, how do you create a menu voice if two menus are at the same company? I mean, if there are architect subscriber and architect no blog, for example, both of them create the same voice at the top level of the menu. If you can scroll up, maybe.
Okay. Where'd my mouse go? Here?
Yeah.
Okay.
102, that line. If two modules at the same line, what is going to be the outcome? Two voices.
Well, you would change that number.
Yeah.
So it would be on the whole system, two separate plugins.
Yeah.
It would have change that number to 28 or 75, and then you change this information in here. So architect free, that's the name of the menu item.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I mean, if two modules at the same top level menu page, so I mean, I just need one voice in the top level and then two sub-menu level. But both modules are going to create this voice.
They'd have to be two separate plugins.
Yeah.
Yeah, just make two complete different plugins.
Okay. I try to make the question better because this is not the answer.
No. Well, we can. Yeah.
The same top level. Yeah.
When the first one wins, the first one is the first in order, and the second
It's unique.
Yeah, you would have times the same order.
Yeah.
So this is what makes it unique as well. So this is what makes it unique, is the file name itself, as opposed to a full separate plugin. You're trying to make two menu items in the same plugin?
No.
Two separate plugins.
Two separate plugins.
Yeah.
The same menu item.
Yeah, they're unique just by the file name.
Okay.
Yeah. And the folder. So the folder, this folder has to be its own name too. And that folder has to be the same as the file name. So then WordPress knows they're two separate things. Is that good? Okay. So we just made our menu. Let's look at our admin. So here it is in the real world. Here's our menu here, architect free. I click on that. And it takes me to the settings page. I just have a couple settings in here right now, but these, as you can be aware, can be quite complex, the setting page, depending on what you're going to do. Here I just want to have the option of if I want to turn off or on the email automatic generation. I'll also list the subscribers, any new subscribers that come in. On my admin, I'll see them. Here's a testing person, email address, and whenever they opt in. I have it as a double opt-in, but you can make it active right away if you want to. And then I also have ability to add a subscriber from within my admin. So if someone phones me up and says, I want to be on your list, you can just type them in right away rather than making them go to a website. And then the front side of it, here's the plugin. I mean the WordPress site. It's just a generic one. I made a menu item here. And we're going to make a widget that you'll see over here where they, on the sidebar, that lets them put in their email and their name. So that's what the plugin we were looking at we wanted it to do. So I kind of went ahead of myself. Here's the function to create the config page or the settings page. As we checked earlier, we want to know, because we said earlier in our code that anyone that has manage options credentials can access our plugin and can access our pages. So we're double checking here. If the current user doesn't have manage options, kick them out. So it's another quick return. Even if they happen to jump straight into that page and they click on it and they don't have the credentials, they're out. Otherwise, again, we're using a defined variable and we're bringing in the config page code, which is just a form basically. So here's the code for that. the way I write some of my code, I've used it for a long time, is that I have two functions in the same code file, one to show the form and one to verify it. So I just check to see if the submit button's been pushed. If it has, check the form. Otherwise, say, here's your basic welcome message and call the show form. So I'm showing the form here. Again, this is the settings page on the admin side. So we're just looking at some code here that allows them to, this is the checkbox here, the checkbox whether we want to generate emails when the new person signs up. And we already looked at the screen where it just had the check mark on the page. So the next step is the widget, is what we call that form that we place on the sidebar. We're going to do an add action with widgets in it. So this is specific to a widget, and we're going to call a function. So inside that function that we create, we call register widget, and it creates the widget for us based on code that we give it as a requirement. So there's the code, add action widget init, and basically that'll create the widget for us. And here's our code that's being brought in. So like we'll see the widget on the admin side. We're calling it architect contacts widget, and here's the form being dropped in. We can change the title of it. Please sign up to our news feed. And that should be pretty familiar for anyone that deals with widgets and sidebars. And we've seen this in the front side as well. So looking at the code, we are just going to look at, again, we keep all of our code inside our includes folder. The widget. Is here. Here we are. So remember I said earlier to use object-oriented code if possible. There's a whole widget class that WordPress gives you. So try and use that. Just extend that class. Here's my own architect widget, my own class name, my constructor, and I carry on and create the form, which is just give me the form is the widget side, and here's the widget itself, this function. Get to know that class and the different pieces that are in that. And here's where we ask them in HTML, give me your full name and your email. And when it's done, when it's submitted, we call another method called public save. And again, these are part of the widget class. So, a dashboard widget. Who knows what a dashboard widget is? Are they useful? Kind of. Good answer. So, a dashboard widget is something you can do if you're building a plugin and you want to give information or updates to your users. You can just put a dashboard item up there. It's just a widget that's going to be possible up here. It's just a thing you can give information to the admin side of anyone using your plugin. And it also provides a way to turn it on and off. So you can do that real easily. It's quick. And if you want to add user friendliness to your plugin, that's what you can do. Again, you just do an add action. We see this all the time. WP dashboard setup, and then here's our function. So inside that function is what we will have to create. In the interest of time, I'll skip the code for the dashboard widget, but it's in the config file. Shortcodes. Who does shortcodes? Love them, hate them, they're there. So one thing I learned is that if you're doing something in a widget, but you also want it in a shortcode, you have to write two different bodies of code because they act differently on the sidebar than in the shortcode. Maybe there's a way to make them work better, but I haven't found it yet. So that's my only drawback so far that I could find, is that you have to maintain two different bodies of code. But you can get away with a lot of it if you use your includes and requires for some of the common stuff. So instead of add action, instead of the add action, we're just doing a add shortcode. We're calling what it's going to be. This first parameter is going to be what is inside the square brackets for when you're using it on the anywhere in your website. So just based this whatever's in the first parameter is what's going to go inside your brackets when you use the shortcode. And again, here's our code, our own specific code that we're being brought in through a require. So this arch contacts S code is what's being called in the second parameter. So we're going to name it, and this is how we're going to call it. So you've seen, hopefully you've seen something like this before, just where you're inside a post, and somebody's not too mad, I hope. This is where the anything that's inside this square brackets is in your whole include file. Everything can be brought in there. So here, I showed you this earlier. This is what it would look like. The name and email. It's very similar, but you can define different parameters to it if you want. Where did that go? Here. So here it is in the live. Here's the form. Very similar, full name, email, and so on. But you notice that the button is different, so you can have different controls and make it look a little differently, whether it's a widget or shortcode. Now, this is unique. What we've done or want to do in our plugin is when a new post is published, we want to, anyone that signed up through our widget or our shortcode, giving us their email, whenever we do a new blog post or anything on that's new, we want to let these people know as a courtesy, because that's why they signed up. So we're going to look for a new action. And this one is different because it's, before it was a one-step item like initialize. This one is when something happens or a transition. So we're doing a pending to a publish. We also want to go from draft to publish. So if we have a blog post in draft mode and we're ready to publish it, then this function gets called. If we have one that's pending to publish, in either case, the bottom line is if something gets published, we want to let the person know, our email list. So we're going to check first. This is our new post send notify, our thing that gets triggered. We want to check in our own database whether email updates is on or not. So you remember in our config settings, we just have a checkbox whether we're going to send emails or not. We just want to know, is that on? Because if it's off, then we don't want to send everyone a whole bunch of emails. So it's just built in that way. Now this is a whole database connection thing. So we use this global WordPress database. That saves a whole lot of time in database access, so be sure to look that up. And we're building a prepared statement here. So we just check that. Then we also want to do another test, is if this is a revision. If this is a post that someone is updating, but it's already been published. We don't want to nag the person on our email list that we've updated our publication. So we want to just return, get out of there if it's, we only want to let them know if it's a brand new publication. Then we want to check the post ID of what's just been done on WordPress. And if it's a post type, meaning it's not something we've done to a category or not something we've done to a media file, if it's post related, then we will send out the email, mass email. So what are some of the concerns over mass email? Say we have a list of 3,000 emails and we run this. What's the impact on that? $3,000 people get an email all at once, which puts a heavy load potentially on your server, right? So WordPress has a cron thing built in that you can schedule events trigger. So if you think you only have about 50 emails, then just go ahead and send out the email whenever you want. No big deal. People won't be accuse you of spamming. But if you have thousands and thousands to go out and you want to lighten the load, maybe set up your cron to send up maybe 50 at a time overnight, something like that. So you can send, this is the WP schedule event, timestamp, recurrence, the hook, and any arguments you want to send. So we'll not get too deep into that, but just be sure to look that up if you're doing something that requires a heavy load on your server and you want to lighten the load, spread out the work, look into the WordPress's cron. Here's another bit. Has anyone used this before? Is it a true cron? Good. Depends on the implementation. Why would I ask if it's a true cron? What if you don't implement it the right way, how does it get triggered? If you have a visitor, right? So even though you've set up this cron, you set up a timestamp of when you want it to work, someone has to actually visit your site for WordPress to wake up and say, oh, I'll do what you asked. By the way, is there anything cron that needs to be done? If no one visits your site overnight, nothing gets sent out. So hopefully you'll, I don't know, maybe set up an email to or something to ping your site once a night or something. But there are ways around it and ways to make it a true cron. Pardon? Yeah. So internationalization. I'm Canadian. You're mostly probably Italian. Anyone else here from non-Italy? Anyone here from outside Italy? German? That's good. Everyone else is Italian. So I don't usually get into internationalization very much because I'm just English Canada. But Europe, of course, really needs it. Has anyone done this before? Okay, good. So you need a languages folder. Point your code to that folder, add action, and then you have your language files there. When the action is plugins loaded, that means after everything's been done, you want to add your subscriber languages plugin to that list of where languages are. So the load plugin text domain is the function that calls it. You will have architect subscribers. That's the name of your plugin that's going to have the language. And your first parameter is the plugin's name. Second one's deprecated option, so just ignore that and make it false. And the third one is where are the language files stored. Two of the functions that we're going to look at are the double underscore bracket and the double one underscore E. The first one translates your code or your string and puts it into a variable for you. So then you can use it in places or wherever you want within the code. The underscore E translates it and displays it at the same time. It's like an echo statement, basically. There's a whole list of other functions, so take a look at those as well. This is where they are. This is how you test it. You just switch your settings and pick a new language once you set up your code. The first thing you should do is alter your code or program it as you go with multiple languages in mind, and then use Loco Translate plugin. There's a plugin that does that. Anyone else use other tools? There's WPML. Okay, I haven't heard of that one. There's a PoEdit, which is an off-site, its own little tool. So there's a few others out there. I like this one, the Loco Translate. So quickly we'll go through this. We're getting 10 minutes left. So we're going to select the plugin, create the template, edit the template, and this is all within the plugin of Loco. The nice thing about this is that it creates a POT file. And the POT file, if you only want to do one or two languages, you can use the POT file, make it available, and other people can do it for you if they want to contribute to you in their language or multiple other languages. So you don't have to do every language in mind right away if you don't want to. When you go to pick a new language, you pick these options over here and you start your translation. So you pick Italian or whatever the language you want, and this is pointing to the languages folder where you want that language file to go to. Then once that's done inside this plugin, it will search through your code to find any of those double underscore functions and the underscore E and bring them in and let you do the translation. So I've only done one here, so there's adjust settings to your preferences. That's my basic settings page welcome note. And I did a translation here. When you update it and save, it will join these two languages together like that. This is my translator, Google Translate. I have no idea if that's accurate or not. I trust it. So also, if you have something that's important, make sure you have a proper translation, hire a translator to do it right. And this is what you should see. So let's quickly translate my plugin. So remember, here's the settings page. This is the English part up here. My code had at the top right here somewhere. It's in there somewhere. Anyway, under settings, check general. We'll switch to Italian. Save our changes. So now because you're doing this, you're doing obviously the whole admin site of switching languages. But it should, because of our code, also change. And it does. So it automatically changes what we've assigned for it to do in that using that function. So if you're going to install it, this is a way to do it. Here's another question. Installing and updating. Where should you do most of your work? I'll answer for you in your updating. So all you want to do when you're installing your plugin is check to see if you have a certain version level if you care about that. Everything else should go in your update. The update has built-in database structures. If you have one of those, if you're doing your own database, that's where you put those in. Because whenever you do issue an update, it'll change your code for you rather than uninstall and install, if that makes sense. Make sure you add the upgrade PHP to it, and then use your DB Delta. This is a great function to know about because it verifies any table changes that you make in your own code and your own database structures, and makes it work, does it for you. And if you have any default pages that you want to build in with your plugin, you can get page by title, see if it exists. If it's not set, then you can create a page for your plugin. So we would have some opt-in confirmations and things like that for our email and so on. We don't have time to look at the code. Who uses the debug bar? If you don't know, it's good. That's very helpful. It's another plugin that allows you to, as you're testing and writing your code. There's another one called Query Monitor that helps you with your SQL and so on. And this URL has a bunch of other things to help you with your debugging and development. If you're packaging the plugin, save everything as a zip file for yourself. Any updates are manual announced. That's if you're doing it yourself. If you're doing it on WordPress, this is the process of getting them to test it out. You have to get an account, submit it, they check it, make sure it passes all their rules, and they give you an SVN access, and then make sure it has a README file, and it will be distributed to the world. Additional resources, this is where the sample code will be. Like I said, wait for the update of this book because that code will be in there. Did anyone figure out where Prince Edward Island was? Polar? No. It's cold, but we're not in the east. We'll take it. Have a book. One thing I want to mention is RingCentral. We made a major plugin with them. I helped develop it. It's called RCCP Free. Look that up. They helped me with some travel arrangements for this as well, for coming to this conference. So I wanted to thank them. What this does, it's more advanced. If you know RingCentral, it has a whole API interface for emails, faxes, texts, and all that kind of stuff, conferencing, online conferencing, and so on. So we're going to, if you look at that, you'll see a lot of those things that we built today inside there. No questions? Thanks very much.